Hi, I'm Laura,
I'm Deanne.
And I'm Philippe.
and welcome to our Lymond Book Club. We are reading Queen's Play by Dorothy Dunnett, and we're in part 3, and we're going to do chapters 5, 6, and 7. Philippe will lead this discussion, and before we start, we're going to share our overall impressions of these chapters.
Yes. So the first chapter, The Intentional Betrayal, was mostly expositional and a lot of stuff that I didn't really understand. Not my favorite chapter. The last chapter is only about 3 pages and confirmed a lot of what we've already suspected. So I imagine the same, you guys feel the same. That second chapter, chapter 6, was one of my favorite chapters in this book and possibly in the entire Lymond series so far. Just that sort of meeting of the minds and the chess game that's being played while Oleum Rowe is just an innocent bystander between Margaret Lennox and Lymond was very fun to read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually did like that this first chapter. There are a couple things I really liked in it, but I think my favorite part of the first chapter we're going to look at is the dinner from the ambassador's wife's perspective. Like, I just thought that was a delightful example of Dunnett's use of perspective and how she takes we're in someone's head who absolutely doesn't matter to the story at all, and yet we still get really good information, and we get this picture of this woman. We get kind of this lovely picture of this woman who's so exasperated, and yeah, I liked that scene a lot. And then I really liked seeing Oleum Rowe in this whole section, and just his, like Philippe said, seeing the Lennox and Margaret and Lymond's interaction through his eyes, but also just seeing him and his response to Lymond / Tatty Boy and how he felt about all of that, and his feelings about Una and all of that. And then, of course, being vindicated at the end was nice. So it's like, yes,
You were right.
Wrong. It was really the Queen Dowager the whole time who's
Trying to kill her own daughter. Who would have thought? So yeah, I love these chapters. Actually, I think these are some of my favorites in the series as well. Like Philippe, I love the scene with Margaret Lennox. I love that she even gets thrown off her game a bit. I love how much we see her and we see Lymond through her eyes. And I love her obsession and lust and hatred and how they all blend together into this really intense, overwhelming battle between the two of them, really. And then I also I absolutely love the scene from the point of view of the ambassador's wife. It's such a clever use of outsider point of view. She has no idea what's going on. And every single thing that she thinks is happening is completely wrong. And I just love that game that Dunnett is playing with her readers, where you have to read through the lines and see what's actually going on. She talks about the despised wine that he's swirling around, and you know that he's like, oh God, I want to drink the wine, but he won't let himself do it.
He doesn't, which I was very proud of.
Yeah, it was really cool. Yeah, it's just a masterclass in point of view and how to give information through point of view in a way that, it was a good scene.
So we're going to start with chapter 5, London, the Intentional Betrayal. And I just want to read the opening because it's kind of ominous. Every betrayal, intentional or with concealment, is false. There are equal fines for the theft which is concealment and the concealment which is robbery. Thou shalt not kill a captive unless he be thine. Did not sit well with me when I first read this because I thought immediately, well, this is going to be the chapter where Robin Stewart dies. We do get a death, however, it's not Robin Stewart. So that was my initial thought when starting this. So we set it up.
Oh, wait, let me also add.
I had a quick thought about that too, which is does that mean if a captive is yours, you just have free reign to kill them, which seems a little dark?
Yes.
But
well, I was going to say, I think it's interesting that these quotes kind of started out funny, and they get darker and darker. And this sort of sets up this idea that, maybe you didn't want to live in ancient Ireland with the archaic morality of you know, don't kill a captive unless it's yours, in which case it's fine to kill them.
If you kidnap somebody, you have full free reign to kill them. Go
Mhm.
for it.
So this chapter begins with Bryce Harrison's point of view. He's sort of confused about everything that just happened, like these whirlwind of events that led to him getting arrested with treasonous papers. It reiterates the fact that he has no lost love for the Lennoxes. And really at this point, who does have any love lost for the Lennoxes? And he sets up a meeting, or a meeting is set up for him with John Atkinson, who was the sheriff, and our favorite Vervassal, Master Lymond, is with him. So I just thought it was really neat going into this chapter, how we see Lymond dress up in all these fineries again. He's like back to that robust way of dressing that we saw him completely throw away as Tatty Boy. So it's like we get a return to the Lymond of book one, which I thought was really fun. And like he really takes care of himself in these fineries, which is fun to watch and read.
I think it's interesting too, because I think every single thing about Vervassal is the opposite of Tatty Boy. You know, the impeccable tailoring, the gold tower that's glittering, the sort of just like the super clean, super neat, super restrained, super polite, like everything about it is constructed to be the opposite of Tatty. And so part of me also wonders, is this really any more the true Lymond than Tatty Boy was?
Yeah. No, I think we get a glimpse. We see a little bit of the true Lymond when he's juggling the coins and throws one in the fire, you know, later, way later in the section. But yeah, this like ultra precise, ultra put together. I don't know. Like, yeah, Lymond's obsessive about his personality, but this guy's like toned down in a way that I don't think the true Lymond is. So.
Well, I'm not 100% sure we've seen the true Lymond yet, even in all of 2 books. So, yeah. But I think this portrayal is closer to what I was used to in the first book, because Tatty Boy is such a complete opposite of his behavior in the first. So
maybe even that scene with Richard
in the dell.
Yeah, in the dell, maybe.
Yeah, but I think also Lymond has a joy de vivre, and we saw that in Game of Kings. In those kind of over the top scenes, like with the Piper, that Vervassal doesn't have at all.
Yeah.
He's way too restrained and way too cold. He's icy. There's this ice motif that goes with him, and she uses the words like freezing and icy and cold.
Yeah. Did she use any fire language with Tatty Boy?
I don't think she ever did. Tatty was always like earth, vines, wine, but Vervassal is always fire and sunlight. He's in the fire, he's reflecting on the fire, he's in the fire, he's in the sun.
And ice. So he's like fire and ice.
Yeah, and she uses all these metal words. She keeps using silver and gold a lot. So it's like this cold, metallic character.
Interesting.
Oh, and sparkling. He's always sparkling and glittering and glistening. Like you could cut yourself on him, you know, but you probably wouldn't want to hang out with him. It makes people uncomfortable because it's sharp.
Right. Yeah. Huh. Okay. I did think that opening bit about how confused Bryce was super funny. About had he been trapped by a peasant walking on all fours in a goat skin, Bryce Harrison couldn't have been more confused. And I had a quick thought, like, I wonder if that's referencing an actual like folktale or something.
But maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I also liked his jostling language is littered, chipped, and useless in his mind.
Yeah. Like he's so discombobulated, he can't think.
Yeah. And like, again, we got this, the last chapter, this, like, that's one of the things he prides himself on, his mastery of these languages. And in almost every situation where we've seen in him, that skill completely fails him. So.
Yeah.
Not a strong.
We get that bit in a second that the sheriff only lets Lymond in because he's so impeccably tailored.
Yep.
Like, okay.
I also like just right after that, the description she gives of Lymond. as a clear-eyed messenger of fate. Which is how Bryce sees him. It's kind of what he is to Bryce, but it's also that again, that recurring motif of fate, you know, we had at the very beginning where he was coming in on Clotho's distaff, looking out for the scissors. This book is all about Lymond's fate, and now here he's like kind of playing a messenger of fate for someone else.
Yeah. And yet, even with all of his cold control and the way she describes some of them, he misplays Bryce in this scene, which is interesting. Like, he's not fully in control because he doesn't read him correctly, and that's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's interesting in a few ways, because we keep getting these sort of this recurring theme, especially we'll talk more about later, like Liam Rossi is about Lymond as this puppet master playing people and using people. And he is definitely trying to play Bryce and use Bryce. And you're right, he misses that Bryce is just nowhere near Michel, his brother, which is what he was assuming, that he was going to be, you know, at least some degree of strong like his brother. I think it's also interesting, we get twice, we get Lymond's take on Bryce, and it's really you know, negative and nasty. He says, you know, your mind is not very quick, and then later he says, you are appallingly ignorant of affairs. Like, he's super cold and harsh in the way that he communicates to Bryce also.
Yeah. And you kind of wonder if he'd come into this scene and read him as much weaker, if Lymond had been like almost sycophantic or like super flattering to him, would he have gotten what he wanted? Like, if he just played the whole scene in a very different way, would Bryce have like folded like a deck of cards and given him what he wanted?
And I think also we get throughout the section until the end, Lymond is in an incredible amount of physical pain that he's trying to hide. And that's part of why I think he's off his game and misses things.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and also he's just, even though he's had time to heal, it's been several weeks, he's still just broken from his time as Tatty Boy. He's broken from the physical injuries that he's feeling pain from. He's broken from, like, I mean, mentally, he has just spent a considerable amount of time using a really bad coping mechanism to try and deal with trauma that he's had from the past. Like, yeah, it's not.
I mean, also he's like, we keep getting all these descriptions of him as spare and slender and stuff like that. So he's super slim, and that's not because he's working out. That's because he's not eating. Like, there's a couple references to him like barely eating or just nibbling at his food. He's still sick from the nightshade, probably.
So he probably can't keep things down and is in pain. He's probably got a lot of intestinal pain, and
Well, and I think also though there's also this underlying he's angry, and there's this like anger and this edge and this darkness that kind of peeks through the margins, which I think is also part of why he makes people so uncomfortable. And again, it's probably distracting him and keeping him a little off his game, because it's an emotion driven thing that's going on underneath.
Yeah. And probably all of this is contributing to, he's probably not sleeping very well. So on top of everything else, like, your body needs to sleep and your brain needs to sleep. So his brain is dealing with physical pain, emotional pain, lack of sleep, lack of food, all of that. So, yeah.
By the way, I just love how Dorothy Dunnett, like, we just spent like 5 minutes talking about how Lymond needs to take care of himself. I love how she creates that in her readers. And part of it is like, if she tried to do it like most writers would do, like, oh, he was in pain, blah, blah, blah. You'd be like, yeah, it's your own damn fault. But because she doesn't try to make you feel sympathetic, and she gives you the point of view of people who are totally unsympathetic, she puts you on the side of being like, oh, but, you can't judge him so harshly. He's in pain.
Well, also, she is also using the tactic that Lymond is using of hiding his pain. So, like, Lymond is hiding his pain, but Dunnett is also, like, disguising and yet absolutely not disguising. Like, she's revealing his pain, but in ways that feel like it's hidden from us. So we have more sympathy. Like, if Lymond had been sort of like, oh, my leg hurts, I can't walk. Like, nobody would have sympathy for him. But
No.
because he's hiding it and trying to be like, don't pity me. So then we have pity. And yeah.
Exactly. No, it's I think it's a very clever tactic because it kind of lets her have him do a lot of irresponsible things that kind of are his own fault and still keep the reader's sympathy.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Oh, and speaking of fire motifs, in the jeweled light of the fire from the herald's gold, from the fire, the herald's gold tissue glistened flatly. Like that's the kind of words we get about him over and over and over.
So Bryce, we find out that Warwick wants Bryce Harrison out of the way until he finds out how much the French ambassador Deschamaux knows. A lot of this chapter is set up on the pretext that certain characters know certain things and they're trying to use that information against each other. And it's just this like game of mental chess between all of them. It's like who knows what, who knows what, and all of these things on top of that. So we find out, of course, which we already knew, that the reason the Lennoxes knew about all of this is because William Rowe was being followed, which we get a lot more of in the next chapter. And Lymond is pretty much here talking to Harrison because he wants to know where Robin Stewart is, and he wants to know that part of the story. What does Robin Stewart know? That's the most important information to Lymond because that will tell him who he was working with in France and who's trying to kill Mary. And of course, Harrison...
I think this scene is a genuine seeking on Lymond's part. Like, so many times we as the reader are fooled, like Lymond knows stuff and we think he doesn't know it, but I think he genuinely doesn't know. Like, I think this is a genuine, he's desperate to find Robin. And we find out later that he did suspect Dabney. Like, he says that he suspected Dabney, but I don't think it's not actual knowledge because he's so desperate to find Robin that like they need to know who the employer is. So even if they suspect Dabney, they're not sure.
Well, and even if they know, they have no evidence at all. So knowing doesn't do them any good if they can't, convict him and stop him.
And with somebody of D'Aubigny's stature in France, you can't just go in and point fingers and say it was this person without anything to back it up.
I mean, they can take steps to thwart him if they know it's him for sure, but they can't do anything to stop him. Like, if they know it's him for sure, I think there are steps they could do to protect the queen from him and how far his reach goes, but they couldn't get rid of him.
Right.
Yeah, but also think
he is in Henri's favor because of all that we've learned about him. So that even complicates things more.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Think about the political balance there. If the Queen Dowager of Scotland is saying to the King of France, hey, your friend is trying to kill my daughter, he's gonna be like, no way, my friend is my friend. Like, how dare you accuse him?
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying if they knew it was D'Aubigny for sure, they could do things like make sure that her candy is not in the reach of men who are in his control. So like things like being, as long as Jenny Fleming doesn't ruin things. But if you know it's him, you don't have to accuse him to take steps to make it harder for him to get to her.
Yeah, but you can't stop him because you don't know who all he has access to and who he could send after her. Like, she'll always be in danger at any point. Someone could come out of the bushes and stab her, and who knows how D'Aubigny got to them.
Yeah. I just think if they had actually known it was D'Aubigny, they would have been more prepared for things that happened previously in the book. So,
but I also think Lymond suspected it for a while. And like, remember when he goes and finds the candy, it's specifically because he suspects someone who's close to, being able to get to her bedchamber and get to the candy. So, knowing helped, right? He actually saved her because that would have killed her, but it's not enough. So I also love at the end, I agree with you, by the way, that Lymond definitely is genuinely, really, really wanting to get to Robin Stewart here. That's his goal. He wants to get to Robin Stewart first.
Well, I mean, he even says it in the next little bit. So
Yeah. I love the way he ends it with a threat. Your choice is France or Warwick, Lennox, and death. And then he has a strict expression as if condemning the dramatic vulgarity of this speech.
I
So, you know, he'll play this game, but he doesn't like it.
I also like how Lymond uses the tactic of actually revealing who he is.
Mm.
In all of his disguises and stuff before, he's never really just come out and said to somebody, yeah, I'm Lymond, of course. But like, that's his way of sort of trying to get Harrison to get what he wants out of this. So
and he is like, you know, he's the voice of irony and reason. He's super sharp and competent, but he does screw up. You know, he's not perfect.
Yep.
Then also, like, so then right after that scene, do you want to move on from that scene?
yeah, that's everything I had for this part. So
Okay, so I like how he talks to Deschambault, and there's this word. It says, the account by Lymond of this affair was readiary in its lack of substance. In effect, the herald said only, I'm sorry we've lost him. I rather think I mishandled it. I looked up readiary, and it says armed with a net. But I was assuming it's some synonym meaning reticent, because that's actually what he is. He's reticent.
That's what I assumed it was.
So I'm probably just missing an archaic definition somewhere.
Yeah.
But I like this reticence in him, but I also like how he immediately takes responsibility and says, I rather think I mishandled it, like it was my fault, which is like the opposite of Robin Stewart. And I think it's interesting, like I said at the beginning, I take most of the main characters in this as kind of something that Lymond could become, some aspect of him that could be his future. And I think we see here like why he's not a Robin Stewart, even though he could be consumed with bitterness and envy. He's lost his title, all this stuff, because he takes responsibility for his failures, and Robin doesn't. Robin's always blaming other people.
Yeah. And I think this is one of the things that makes him so sympathetic as well, is that has always been willing to take responsibility for the things that are his. And in fact, he takes responsibility for things that aren't his, you know? And that is one of the things that I think, at least to me, endears him to me, like that he is honorable in that specific way, that he owns his own decisions and is not hesitant to say, I screwed up, which.
Yeah. There's also a couple interesting bits in this. One is where Deschambault notices that he has quite a serious limp that he's been hiding, which is one of the ways she shows, you know, in subtle ways, the amount of pain he's in. But also I like that Deschambault notes it. He's way more observant than his wife. And so in that scene where she's annoyed at Lymond, he's the one who gets what's going on and is being sympathetic. Yeah. And then also in this bit, we have him, Lymond calls Harrison a loathsome little muckworm, which shows how much he really, really can't stand him. And it also gives us a hint of this underlying, you know, anger beneath this smooth exterior, which I think is part of what makes people so uncomfortable about him.
Mm-hmm.
He's quite judgmental and has a lot of contempt. I mean, and Harrison, like, to be fair, is pretty contemptible.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we see Harrison call Lymond back about 2 days later, and he changes his mind and decides to let Lymond know where Robin Stewart really is. Of course, this is a ruse because he wants Lymond out of the way so he can actually meet with Robin Stewart. This is one of the things that Lymond definitely falls for. I think he should have caught this, but in his state that we've discussed. So Robin Stewart has been hiding in the brickworks in Islington, which is really where he's been hiding, but Harrison knows he's not there anymore. Sends Lymond on a wild goose chase, unfortunately, and he misses him. And then meanwhile, this next bit goes into Robin Stewart's sort of backstory, everything that's happened to him during this time that he left France. And really, even before that, like, we learn about the fire, we learn about the rabbit hunt, his what happened to him during those times. The poisoned Cotignac is also brought up, and how he was the one that sort of put it there and then also realized it was gone later on. So
yeah, it really, this whole section I'm just kind of, I don't know. Like, I guess I have no more sympathy for Robin. Like, I kept it and kept it and kept it and kept it in the face of all of the evidence that he was terrible. And is like, this just broke it for me. Because it's just, especially the descriptions of him as a young man. Like, there was a little bit where it said, so there's a point midway through 313 where it says his half-set vulnerable emotions trodden underfoot too hard and too early had become a cage lined with mirrors in which daily, nightly, he could examine the shrinking image of himself. So clearly it's telling us that he had a horrible childhood that was diminished him. But I think, Laura, your point of Robin perhaps being a foil to Lymond, in that Lymond also had a horrible childhood where his dad was super abusive and did those same things and crushed him and, you know, all that.
Right, and he got betrayed into galley slavery for 2 years and 5 years of outlawry and being rejected by his family. Like,
right. But where I'm going with this is that, like, it just turned Lymond into it turned Robin into a bully. Like, because you see a little bit later, just in that next paragraph, where his relationship with Harrison, it talks about, like, Harrison didn't respond, but the things that Robin was doing were, like, he's just a bully to him. And so in ways that it doesn't seem from the description we've had of Lymond that he was when he was a kid, you know, that before the whole trauma of the galley slave and Margaret Lennox and all of that, like, before that, it seems like Lymond was still super abused by his dad. Now his mom was supportive, and so he did have a support system there, and it seems like probably his brother was also supportive of him to some extent as a kid, but after a certain point. But he didn't seem to have turned into, like, so we don't have any stories of him being, like, cruel to other kids or things like that, you know, and he grew up to be someone who cares for children, and, like, we've clearly seen his reaction to kids. And so
I do think there's an interesting question, though. If Lymond hadn't had Richard and Sibylla, could he have turned out more like Robin Stewart?
Yeah.
And if Robin had had a mentor, which is what he longed for so much, could he have turned out more like Lymond? And I think the answer is yes. Robin could have been a better person. And also that if Lymond hadn't had Sibylla and Richard, I don't know that he would be the good person that he is.
Yeah. I mean, Robin at one point talks about, like, he's been betrayed. There were, like, 3 men who he hoped and hoped and hoped would be more for him. I'm assuming one is Diabney and one is Tatty Boy. Do we know I don't know if we know the third.
I would assume it's Bryce.
Oh, maybe Bryce, yeah. But he was just betrayed by these men that could have helped him. But also the thing that he wanted wasn't like honorable. He just wanted an easy life. Like, what he wanted them to give him was a life of ease, not a life of service or, you know, to better himself or something like that. He just wanted life to not be hard, which, while understandable, is not.
Yeah. And he overlooked all the opportunities he has had. Like, you're in the Archers, you have opportunities there. You have to take some responsibility for yourself. You can't only expect other people to take care of you and guide you and give you a direction. And that's, like, case in point with Lymond. He was an outlaw for 5 years with only himself and no one else that he could possibly rely on. And he, shaped his fate 20 times and had it broken 20 times and kept getting up and trying. Whereas Robin just whines and whines and whines and doesn't take any responsibility.
Yeah. Robin reminds me of those people who go around saying, like, life isn't fair, with, like, a whiny note. And I'm like, I just want to go, yeah, life isn't fair. Get over it. Like,
right. It's not fair for any of us. And we all have to, we're all in the same boat.
Right. Life sucks. I mean, we're not necessarily all in the same boat. Like, some of us have better boats than others.
Yeah.
But we're all in the same ocean. Like,
yeah.
Like, life kind of sucks. And so, especially for someone who actually has had opportunities, which Robin has, like, it would be different if he didn't have any opportunities, but he did. And yeah.
Well, he
So there's
seems really disabused by this notion that like all you have to do to get things is to work really hard at it and things will come your way. And he has worked really hard in his estimation and nothing has happened.
Right.
But
we keep seeing that even though he thinks he's working hard, he makes dumb mistakes all the time.
Yeah.
yeah, like
He's
listening
not really working that
to
hard.
Albany. So
Yeah.
But also, that's not true. Like, the idea that if you work really hard, good things will come to you is not true. Like, sometimes that will happen, but I always tell my students, this idea that if you work really hard and everything will be good is problematic. It's a problem because
There's a huge amount of luck.
you got to have luck. Like, yeah, it's a combination of working really hard and having good luck. He thought the world worked a certain way where A plus B equals C. So if I'm a person and I work really hard, then I will have a happy, easy life. And then he got mad that didn't happen. And it's like, well, that's because it's not how it works. So.
But I do think one notable difference between Robin and Lymond is that Robin is not very intelligent and Lymond is extremely intelligent. So part of, I think, Robin's, bad choices and misapprehensions about how the world works is because he's just not very smart, which is kind of sad.
Well, also he didn't work very hard because we explicitly gets that he's super lazy. Like, explicitly says he's very, very lazy. So if you're not very smart and you're really lazy.
So I think there's a couple of things in here also that I think are interesting, and one is the degree of like kind of self-delusion and denial he's in. And we get that in two places. One is that the image of Mary, the living child he was to murder, never took shape in Stuart's mind.
Yeah.
And the other one is actually that the name of Tatty Boy Bala he could barely bring himself to mention.
Mm-hmm.
So he's kind of not even letting himself see the reality of what he's going to do and the underlying reasons for things he has done. Like, dude, you were in love with Tatty Boy and you poisoned him because he rejected you. It had nothing to do with any of the plots.
So my question, I'm not sure it ever really mentions it. Does Robin understand how easily manipulated that he is? Like, is he ever actually self-aware of how often people are using him to their own ends?
I mean, he gets mad at Lymond for using him.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he and Oliamro have the discussion in the last chapter.
Well, and actually
gets mad at Bryce Harrison, which we're about to find out, but that's because of the obvious betrayal at his hands.
Right.
So I think though in the last chapter, I mean, Robin is suicidal. Like he actually tried really hard to kill himself. And I think he is at that point kind of seeing himself in the light of reality that, what's the common denominator in all these betrayals? It's you.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of feel bad for him, even though he's a terrible person still.
I agree with you though. This chapter and the next few chapters make me feel less bad about Robin Stewart. I still don't despise him. He's not my least favorite character, but my estimation of him has fallen because of this. So I still think he's tragic and I still think he's going to hopefully do the right thing in the end, but.
Yeah, I feel like this coming back from suicide thing, like he's now nursing him, he's been nursed back to health. We keep talking about the end of this, but like he's been nursed back to health. And I do think he's going to try and like die in some sort of grand gesture or something, just because I think it fits his weird view of the world or something. If he has come to some understanding of his own worth being less than he thought it was, is he going to try and redeem that in some way? I don't know. Anyway, okay, rest of this chapter.
Yes.
So Robin Stewart does show up to this meeting at the Cheapside with Bryce Harrison and immediately doesn't get it right away. When Harrison points out that's the man, he's just kind of standing there, mouth agape, like, what's happening? Huh?
Well, no, at first he's like, wow, what a great house for us to plot in. He's even brought a sheriff. How exciting. Which again is why I feel bad for him, because he's
going to be the go-between with Warwick.
He's just like
That's
a
why,
dumb kid,
I asked about this movie. Yeah, poor Robin. So, they try and arrest him and do a really bad job of guarding him because they sort of just let him take out his sword and kill Bryce, which, well, I understand why. We find out later. It's like they wanted Bryce Harrison out of the way. So they, again, used Robin Stewart as an ends to their means. Warwick did, so.
Yep, yet again, he's manipulated, and
Yeah.
at least he figures it out later. But yeah, it's super obvious because like he's not guarded, and the sheriff's like, thank God that Master Harrison betrayed you. Hint, hint.
Yeah, and I love this. The guards, the two men still stood on either side of him, but neither crowded him carelessly. They had left him his sword.
Yeah, I bet carelessness.
Carelessly, they'd left him his sword.
There's also a bit that I really like here. We're in Stewart's point of view when he realizes that Bryce has betrayed him. And it says, at first he's kind of in the suspension of understanding, thinking nothing at all. And then a distorted picture slipping glutenlessly from nowhere into his vacant mind showed him Tosh chattering amiably among the wood shavings and a pearwood block with the coulter arms. So he's realizing he's been betrayed, and then he's syncing it up in his mind with the moment he realized that Lymond was Tatty Boy Bala and that Tatty Boy had betrayed him.
Yeah. And then he misses in the next moment that he's actually alive, that Lymond's alive.
He thinks it's O'Liamro. Oh, dear Christ, send you to hell, you filthy tattle-bearing runt. You're in league with O'Liamro. Well, not quite.
No.
I mean, you get the fact that you're being used, but by the wrong person this time, so.
I think part of why I still feel bad for him is he's just so clueless.
So clueless. And then he kills Bryce.
And Bryce gives it this whole lecture about everything that's wrong with him. You never did one thing well in your life. Which I think is right. I mean, Bryce knows him really well, and all of these things seem to be true. He was very, very sloppy, even in all of his plotting that he thought was so brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, sloppy villains.
Yep.
I like that. You couldn't knock the head off a buttercup, says Bryce to Robin Stewart.
Probably not the best thing to say to someone who has a sword and who you just betrayed.
Yeah, he's sort of asking for it, but...
Yeah. I mean, these are both very unsympathetic characters. Like when Bryce dies, you're like,
yeah.
Yeah, oh well. Like, I like his brother, even though we got very little of him, so.
Okay.
It's strange
dinner.
how different they
oh, the dinner.
The dinner.
Dinner. Or Johanna, however you say it. Yes. So yes, Lymond goes to have dinner with Deschamaux.
Yeah.
Well, so I like how it starts with Deschamaux at first, who's noting he has no doubt that Vervassal would handle it competently. Aside from the competence, there was an understanding of the unseen balances of the situation, which went deeper than Deschamaux' own. So Deschamaux sees how insightful Lymond is, and how much he isn't just competent, but he realizes the underlying politics of the situation. And I like this guy. He's really observant. He picks up on how capable Lymond is, actually, which again is just this delightful contrast to his really clueless wife.
Mm-hmm. I love this little bit next where it says, when unguardedly he had spoken of Stewart to his wife, she had exclaimed, an assassin? Ah, not from John and Anne's own company. How he will feel it, meaning John will be upset that this assassin was from his own company.
So upset.
He felt, without seeing it, the flick of Lymond's attention.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a little clue.
I also like that this scene is a dinner, because Tatty Boy, his big entry was at a dinner, and his big finale was at a dinner, the one where he was poisoned. And at this dinner, Lymond as Vervassal is the anti-Tatty Boy. He's all business. He leaves early. He doesn't drink his wine. He's not the life of the party. He's not any fun at all. He takes a convo to work.
He's like
Frustrating
playing with the
job.
wine in the cup. She's afraid he's going to spill it on her tapestries.
Yep.
He's not entertaining. He's annoying the hostess. Although I love the fact that he's not attempting to be entertaining at all. Like, he's not vivacious. He's not doing any of that. And yet even that, it says, she's telling some ridiculous story about her kid and a cat. And it says, certainly he smiled at her and said something she must try to recall next time she wrote to Maman. So even with him like not even trying at all, he still like half-heartedly says something that's at least interesting enough that she's like, oh, I need to remember to tell my mother that. That was...
He just can't help being charming
Yeah,
and witty.
like it's just unconscious.
I also like the way that it describes her as being afraid of the queer cat-like young man with the stick. Again, this idea there's something odd about him, something off-putting, something underneath, and also the cat-like quality that we have, you know, from his very first scene in Game of Kings. So also he crumbled.
I was a little bit suspicious of that line because it's not from her perspective, it's from her husband's perspective. And so it says, Jahan, I don't know, Jean, his wife, he guessed was afraid of the queer cat-like young man with the stick. And I'm like, was his wife really afraid? Is that like, I mean, I just put off to the side. I was like, like I'm suspicious that any like woman around Lymond, like if we're gonna go for an emotion, I'm not sure fear is the immediate one. Like,
I don't know. I think
like she's annoyed by him at this dinner, yeah, but I'm also like, she's probably kind of attracted to him, not afraid of him. Like,
well, everyone's attracted to him, aren't they?
Exactly. So the husband is like, oh, my wife's a little afraid of this guy, and I was kind of like, really?
I don't know. I do think though that he makes her uncomfortable, and she doesn't like him.
Yeah, I agree with that. Totally.
So also, one, he crumbles his way through the meal. That's that reminder. And yeah, then the way that he plays with the drink, and like swirls it around, which is interesting because like Lymond doesn't fidget, generally speaking. He's not that kind of person. So the fact that he is fidgeting with his wine tells us a lot about, you know, like presumably he's a recovering alcoholic. He really wants that wine.
Yeah. Well, and it's a painkiller that was commonly used. So he's not even using it for that, which is kind of impressive.
Yeah, he must be in so much pain.
Yeah.
And then also there's just the entertainment of the outsider point of view, and the way that Jahan at the end is like, you know, he barged into our dinner and was rude, but if you look at what happened, he was going to his room and she was like, come into dinner, and he can't say no because he's a guest, so he has to go to the dinner, but he does not want to be at this dinner.
No.
And he's exhausted, right? He's gone to, I think he was talking to the ambassador, and then he went looking for Robin Stewart. He rode the horse, which wasn't easy for him yet. So like he really is like probably on the verge of collapse by the end of this dinner.
Yeah, that's another thing that made me be like, yeah, the wife's not afraid of him though. It's because she like hears his footsteps in the hall, recognizes his footsteps as his, goes out and be like, come in to dinner.
I don't know, but I mean, do you see any sign in the text that she's attracted to him?
No, I just think it would be logical. And I don't see any sign in the text other than her husband's assumption that she's afraid of him. I think she's annoyed by him. Like, because he's not behaving according to the proper rules that she wants him to behave at her dinner. But yeah, I think if she was afraid of him, I don't think she would have been like, don't sneak by, come to dinner.
She's a big stickler for like the proper, you know, rules of society or whatever. So she's probably like, well, he's my guest, so I have to invite him to dinner.
Yeah. Poor nobody at this dinner is doing well.
So here's a note, which is that he calls Robin a poor idiot, which I think is interesting because it stands in contrast to what he calls Bryce. He calls Bryce all these really nasty, like he has no time for Bryce. You really can't stand him. But with Robin, he does have pity for him versus the loathing for Bryce. So I think that's interesting, although we also see that he doesn't, you know, he's still very blasé about using and manipulating Robin and doesn't really care what's going on with Robin, but he does at least have some pity for him.
Yeah. What's the deal? Okay, I was a little confused about this. Lymond very explicitly tells the French ambassador, Raoul, that he can't move Stewart, that the English have to move Stewart. And it seems to be implied that he thinks Raoul would kill him, like, because the English will keep him safe. And Rob was like, okay, I understand. And then
No, I think what it's about is that the English, if they want to assassinate him, could assassinate him if the French have custody and blame it on the French for not taking good care of him. Whereas if the English are responsible, then they'll be blamed if an assassination succeeds.
Right.
That makes sense. I was kind of like, I don't get why why would Raoul do that? That makes sense. Okay.
And then we have also, I just want to note the curious quick lurch he had, which covered whatever was wrong with his leg. So again, we see like he really is still very injured and he's working very hard to hide it, but he can't completely hide it.
No, it's always going to be there. Not always, but especially now in this recovery.
Yeah.
Again, just really pointing out, trying to get Deschamaux to get that confession from Robin Stewart. He's literally trying to get all of these different characters, like, get Robin Stewart's information because I know for a fact he won't give it to me. So.
Yeah, and he has a superior unknown still living in France. Although that look on his face clearly indicates he suspects Diabny that he gave earlier when the wife mentioned, oh, he must feel so bad.
Poor John.
And Lyman's like,
So then also, I think at the very end of the scene kind of is some of the info that helps us to understand what's been going on the whole time, which is that Deschamaux is looking at him and suddenly goes, go, you wish to go, I shouldn't have kept you. And Lymond pretends it's not happening. Like he acts like there's nothing wrong, but obviously Deschamaux sees something in him, like, weakness or faintness or something where he's, in pain. And then we have Lymond, his weight on his stick. And as soon as he leaves the dinner, he goes straight for his room. So we know, even though it doesn't explicitly tell us, that this whole dinner he was just kind of barely making it through. And Deschamaux figures it out and Jahan has no idea.
Yeah, none.
Which is just a wonderful, like, little outsider point of view sketch and like little character sketch of her also. She's so clueless.
And her just intense desire to have protocol be observed. And it just wasn't. But and she's like, he's gonna spill wine on my tapestry.
They're very expensive.
All right. Onward to Margaret Lennox.
Yes, Lymond leaves for the Lennoxes to rescue Lymond. And just reading that last sentence of this chapter was like, ooh, next one's going to be good. So, chapter 6, London, the Nettle, and the Venom, which is fun. Do we want to go over the beginning, the caption? I didn't really find anything in it, so.
I don't have anything.
Okay. So, we see Lymond has been being toyed with by Margaret Lennox, and we learn all of the devious ways in which she's had him followed and gotten information out of him. And it's poor Lymond because he's just trying his very best to play at Margaret Lennox's level, and he can't do it. He's not making stuff in conniving. So
I love he did his level best, cursing wildly under his breath. Like, he's not only trying, but he knows he's not doing great. So you're just like, oh, buddy.
I enjoy the descriptions of her, which kind of go back and forth about her beauty and then her bathed in innocent light. But then also these images of her toying with him and the comparison of her later to the cheetah, this sort of beautiful but deadly creature that she is.
Her descriptions are just so full of irony, like the bathed in innocent light, and it's just, it's just dripping with irony and in these delightful ways.
Which reminds us of the scene where we first meet her in Game of Kings and we don't know what she's really like. And it seems at first that she's, more innocent and Lymond is using her and threatening her. And we're in Will Scott's point of view, who sees it that way. And then later, if you go back and read that scene, it's completely different. She is totally the one with the power.
Yes. Like when I started that and said, oh, I like Margaret Lennox. If I could go back in time and slap myself.
You didn't know. I didn't know.
But also you can like her as a character because her scenes are always very dynamic and entertaining.
I do like reading chapters with her because they get really interesting, but you know, it's because of my intense dislike for her now. And like going back to what I think Dee said maybe last video or before that, how we want a villain who knows what they're doing. Like, this is what we have. Like, it's so refreshing to read this chapter because she knows what it's all about and she's on Lymond's level, maybe even ahead of him in a couple different ways. So, you know.
Yeah. Like, you genuinely don't know if Lymond is going to win against her. At least there's a risk that he will fail, that she will beat him. And yeah, it's kind of funny that I was saying that last video and now it's like, oh, here comes Margaret.
Right.
Yeah.
But we definitely had hopes that she would have a part in this book, and now we haven't. So
yeah.
So one of the things she manipulates him into doing is talking about Lymond in his tatty boy guise, and of course she knows that it's Lymond, and he doesn't know that she knows, and then he figures it out. Oh yeah, right, George Douglas would have told her. And twice he describes Tatty Boy as grand and then splendid. So he at this point thinks Tatty Boy is dead, and he's looking back with some fondness actually for the good side of Tatty Boy, which is kind of sweet. And it's like, oh yeah, he did bring this he brought this spark of joy that we kind of miss.
Yeah, now that he's dead, I think well of him.
But then also there's this bit where he says that Tatty Boy is dead, and it says, for a moment her eyes widened, then the lashes fell. It's just, you didn't tell me this, of what? And he says, and then it says, there was an odd look on Lady Lennox's face, a look of astonishment mixed with a kind of satisfaction, as if he had confirmed something she had already suspected. So I'm intrigued by this because I think when Lymond then reappears, she pretends she knew he was alive. But I am not sure that she did. Because here this is more than just a reaction to, oh, Liam Rowe doesn't know. This is more of a reaction of like, oh wow, he's dead.
Yeah, this was a bit of a shock. Like, I think this news was a shock to her. One thing I do want to mention before we go too far into Margaret's interactions is that I thought Dunnett did a really nice job right before this of giving us the recent history of Ireland, which I really needed.
Yeah.
Like, it was super helpful to have that, like, here's what's been happening in Ireland over the last like 60 years or something, or 100 years. And so that was a lovely bit of exposition that was just thrown, like, you know, 2/3 of the way into the book. We didn't really need it up until now. And now we get a much better sense of like where Liam Rowe fits into all of that.
And it
so
also
I'm
gives
really
us,
grateful that she did that.
it also gives us finally some reason of why this Cormac O'Connor character, who we haven't met yet, has some importance to the story.
Right.
And I think he's going to become incredibly important after the reveal we find out about him and Una a little bit later in this chapter. So
yeah,
I was glad for that too.
Back to Margaret.
Back to Margaret.
I just wanted to give Dunnett a little bit of thanks for that.
Also, just this imagery of Margaret with this monkey is like, I don't know, I think of it as like a supervillain image. You know how the James Bond villains always have like some weird pet or something. Yeah. Like this to me is like, why in the world does she have a monkey? Oh, because she's a supervillain. Of course she has a monkey.
Well, also, I thought it related to the first line of this section where it says she played with him like a child plays with a squirrel. And it's like she toyed with him the way a child toys with a squirrel. And so it's like the adult Margaret is still doing that childish behavior of toying with an innocent animal. And it's not like, the animal is a toy, not a living thing, a living entity to her. And so it was like this nice comparison. Like she's an adult woman who's very smart and very savvy, but she still has this childish selfishness that objectifies the things around her. So
yeah, I mean, she's definitely a morally bereft human being. There's something missing, no matter how smart she is.
And there's this moment once the monkey is dead that really called back to me Lady Boyle how she treated Oliamro after the Luidus incident. And Oliamro sort of has that same reaction. Like, he treats the monkey with the same sort of grace that he did with Luidus when Luidus was dying. So
like, and he acts, I mean, like, his actions kill the monkey, even though it's not his fault, in the same way that his actions kill Loudus, even though it's not his fault. And it just made, like, I'm just like, he keeps getting put in that position of,
yeah. And I think it also is actually true of Lymond too, that he's upset by the death of the monkey and that he treats the monkey with a great degree of gentleness.
yeah.
But we're
Dorothy Dunnett to stop killing animals, please.
I told you guys this book, part of the reason it's hard for me to read is that she's so horrible to so many animals in this book.
Did she keep doing this after this book?
No, it's mainly this book. I mean, there's a few, but it's mainly this book. In the next book, she kills lots of people instead.
Okay.
Oh, thanks. Spoilers.
Hey.
Sorry.
That's all right. I mean, we know that we're going to be seeing a lot of death in this whole series. So I enjoy how when Vervassal shows up and there's this instant chill in the room, we sort of get Margaret Lennox's perspective for once on how she's reacting to it as he walks in.
I love some of the descriptions. It's right at the top of that section when Lymond comes in, and he's in the shadows, dimly sparkling like a crystal half seen in the dark. And then he comes into the room, and the cloth of gold tabard is thick and dazzling as the sun on the sea. So all these images of he's sort of sparkling, and like often his face is in shadow actually as Vervassal. So this sort of sparkling metallic creature emerging from the darkness. Yeah. Again, opposite of Taddy Boy in every way.
Mm-hmm. And then he affects Margaret. Like, she's not unaffected by him. Like, she drew a long, unsteady breath. And yeah, she's not, like, she just learned of his death, and then he shows up in person, and she's a little unsettled by all of that, which is good.
So yeah, I don't think she knew he was alive then.
Yeah.
And also what's in addition, I think it's the next scene or the next paragraph where she observes him, and she's so like rabid for information about him, like the way before she was manipulating Oliamro into talking about him, and then what she sees, and we actually get what she sees, an untouched boy's face of 8 years before. So again, how old was he when they got together? And another more recent with the new hammer shapes of leadership plainly on it. That's the Lymond of Game of Kings. And now here was a face she had never quite seen, circumstances she did not know, an intellect she recognized, an illness he could not easily hide, pressed and frozen together into a detachment as dark and icy as Oliamro's, for example, was shallow and warm. So again, that darkness and detachment of Vervassal. And then right after that, it says, for all these reasons, for the surge of a blind force within her that she had throttled all these years before and abandoned for dead, Margaret Lennox looked back at Lymond and was silent. What is the blind force?
So I wrote off to the side, did she care for him when he was younger? And I'm curious, like, I wonder if Margaret actually loved him in some way when he was younger, but I can see her being the kind of person that would just deliberately kill that, like any affection for him or whatever, if he sort of got under her skin in some way, and she would just be like, nope. And, you know, her ambition and her desire for power would just kill that. And so I can see her being harsher and angrier and meaner to someone who makes her vulnerable. Like if he made her vulnerable at one point in the past, is she being even more cold and harsh towards him now?
Yeah, he gets under her skin, and she hates that. She hates not being in control. And she's a much higher social class than he is, with ambitions of royalty. So, and he's not anywhere near that. So she hates that he makes her feel this way. But then also she hates that she failed, because she tried to keep him around as her boy toy. And it didn't work. He obviously, to some degree was like, I can't betray Scotland for you. And she hates that she lost. And that he cared about something more than her, because she doesn't care about anything but what she wants. So sort of it puts her to shame that he cares about his nation and cares about other people, when all she cares about is her own selfishness. And so that also makes her angry.
Right. And
but
she's
I also
not at the top of his list. Like, he cares about lots of things more than her.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and it's very clear she is obsessed with him, but he doesn't give a second thought to her. He doesn't care about her at all. He did. He obviously, when he was young, he was very, very hurt by what happened. But she sent him off into galley slavery for years. He's not having any residual affection for her. She betrayed him. He hates her. End of story. Whereas she still can't stop obsessing about him. And also, I think that the blind force is lust, actually, more than anything else. I think it's lust, because I don't think she's really capable of love. So I think she loved him as much as she's capable, but most of that is lust.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, I think that
100%.
like she might have loved him as much as she was able to love him, but that's not very much. Like, because her own self-interest and selfishness would just crowd out any finer feeling.
Right. And she had him in this super vulnerable position, and if you actually love someone, you would try to help them, not sell them out. Then I also like what we see in Vervassal as nearly concealed, a sort of residual power, clear as blown glass, piercing and concentrated as a needle of ice. So again, this icy, sharp Vervassal. So then, Philippe, what happens?
So they have this discussion, and Liam Rowe is mostly ignored. They're sort of talking about him like he isn't in the room. Margaret sort of keeps pointing out all of these things, like, for instance, on 327, Lymond speaks French. Margaret, he doesn't understand French. Of course, I wrote, neither do we. And that's when she sort of starts playing with this box. So she's not sure if Lymond is playing the part of being injured or not. So she sort of tosses it at him to get his reaction, to see what he'll do. And I think she learns a lot about that. She learns, he would usually go, just stop it, but that would be his crutch he would drop. So that's why
I don't even think he has the crutch. He literally can't move his arm.
Can't move his arm. Yeah, it's not.
His arm was broken, right? As well.
Yeah, he broke a collarbone and wrist on his right arm.
Yeah,
so he can't catch it with his right arm.
He can't move his arm at all. As someone who broke their shoulder, I can tell you that is true. You can't.
Well, and it's a great move for her, because no matter what he does, she wins. If he can't protect himself, she shames him and she finds out that he's injured. And if he can, then she reveals he's faking. So there's really no winning move for him. There's only her, hurting him.
There is something I want to point out before this, though. So first of all, I love her line about, she talks to Liam Rowe and she's like, when he walks in and she says, "Please don't allow the shock of it all to confuse you," she said. "Popular resurrections are a tedious pastime of Francis's," which just speaks to the fact that his coming back from slavery was probably a huge shock to her as well. And so she's like, tedious resurrections are a pastime of his. But then later you get a sense of how she actually does know him to some extent, because she says, she's trying to shame him, and she says, although from what I hear of your behavior in France, your whole recollection is presumably blank. Someone gave you a slender excuse and you drank yourself raving into the ditch, which is exactly what happened, and so she is insightful in the midst of being a cold-hearted.
I mean, that's why she's a genuinely threatening villain. Everything she says here is the worst possible interpretation of his behavior, with none of the saving graces of he was trying to help the queen and stuff. but it doesn't mean that she's wrong. She's pretty right about most of this. And again, I think it's also part of what she says here about how, you know, basically you did this to yourself. I'm not going to feel sorry for you being injured. I think the audience would have reacted that way if Dunnett hadn't used the outsider point of view so well, and the fact that he's hiding it to make us in the position as a reader of being like, no, you don't understand. He's injured.
And we don't want to agree with Margaret.
No.
For sure.
Also, we kind of skipped over it, but I love that Lymond doesn't recognize him. And it takes like a couple double takes and then the sound of his voice before he's like, oh shit,
right.
That's him.
Like he's seriously changed.
And then also the cold way that Lymond asks for an introduction and then makes the joke about her pretending that she had introduced the monkey as Lymond. So yeah, that point is then the box and Lymond knocking out of the way and the monkey dying. And I did like this line where it says, Francis Crawford, his face like a mask, which is two things. This is as he's bending over the monkey. One actually uses Francis Crawford, his real name. So telling us that Lymond, like the real person underneath, is upset by the death of the monkey, but also his face like a mask. In this whole book, he's wearing masks. We almost never see his real expression. So we have to assume that he feels bad about the monkey, but we aren't going to see it on his face. It's just the fact that she uses his name that kind of gives us that hint. And then the white and tawny beauty of Margaret Lennox, Lymond thought of another animal and another death, so explicitly comparing her to the cheetah. And Philippe, you said the way that she's dismissive and says he smelt about the monkey. You said that reminded you of Mistress Boyle about Luidus, but it also reminds me of Margaret herself when Christian died. I went right after Christian died and she was like, she was blind.
Yeah.
So horrible.
Yeah. This next section, I was curious about, where they're talking about have the Lennoxes turned Lutheran or Protestant, you know, and so my question there is he telling her, like, don't come back to Scotland, like, don't, like, this whole bit about, then I should advise that he says, like, have you turned Lutheran? And she says no. Then I should advise, said Lymond gently, that he should give it serious thought, meantime to save you the trouble of asking. So is that sort of like, if you're not, he should convert to Protestantism because the Catholic countries are off limits now, or he shouldn't go back to them, or is that what's going on there?
I don't know the politics well enough to know exactly, but I do know that England at this time is Protestant under Edward.
Right.
Edward.
Yeah. Ireland or Scotland's still Catholic, right?
Scotland, the Reformed religion is gaining power. France is Catholic, but with a Protestant like undercurrent starting to bubble up.
Right.
I think it's because she's being Catholic is out of favor of the power in England right now.
Right.
But she's
like saying England.
Well, she's kind of playing her cards by staying Catholic to ally herself with Mary Tudor, who will be the queen if Edward dies, which we know happens. So I think it's about the tightrope she's walking. Right now, she's got the religion that's out of favor, but assuming Edward dies, she's probably staying with that religion because it's going to put her into power with the next monarch.
And Edward's kind of sickly. Yeah. It was obviously about politics and not religion, but I wasn't sure. I was like, what are the politics here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the real Margaret Lennox, but obviously this Margaret Lennox doesn't care about religion. She's just in it for whatever the political benefits are.
Yeah.
Sure. They'd switch in a heartbeat if they thought there was benefit to being Protestant.
Yeah, but they're definitely like super allied with the Catholics.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Philippe.
So they sort of size each other up. They're trying to figuring out, each one is trying to figure out how much of each other's plot they know, which I sort of love that devious nature in that. And then Matthew enters and makes the scene even more confusing. Not that it's confusing, but Matthew clearly
Attention.
is not on the same level as our lovely Margaret and even lovelier Lymond. So he assumes
Hey, Lyman.
William assumes that. Wait,
Well, I was
sorry,
also going
what?
to say the first thing he says when he comes in, he says, "Wager with me," and then he says it again, "Wager with me." And I don't know exactly why he says that, but I sort of think it's like a stay away from my wife, stop talking to her, talk to me, because he's super
Yeah,
jealous.
no, I think that's exactly what it is.
It's super jealousy. He knows the history between them. Like he's
Yeah.
trying to show Lymond, like, back away, mine. So
Yeah.
like you're not going to steal her away from me again.
Right.
And
So
Lyman is like, "I don't want her. She's gross."
Right.
like there's clearly this whole tension about whether their eldest son is Matthew's or Lyman's. And like I have got to say that Lyman knows this kid is not his. Because I feel like it would be way out of character for him to have a son and not like make an attempt to be in this kid's life or rescue him from his horrible mother or something. And so the fact that at least from what we've seen so far, this has not been an issue for him, makes me feel like
Yeah, I don't think it's his kid,
I
think it. And also, so actually, if you do the math, when Lyman had the affair with Margaret, it was before she was married to Lennox.
Right.
She wasn't married at that time. And then he goes off into slavery. Lennox rescues him from the boat and brings him back to be his secretary, right? Was it Lennox? I think it was Lennox. So he's with Lennox then for like 6 months. And at that point, Lennox and Margaret are married because part of Lennox's deal in betraying Scotland was to marry Margaret. So at that point, they're married. So that must have been when their kid was conceived and Lyman was around. And so that is the only time it could have happened. But when we see the confrontation between Lyman and Margaret in Game of Kings, they've clearly not talked to each other since her original betrayal. They did not interact during that time when the son was conceived. So I think we can assume from that he's not the father. They didn't have sex again, during that time when he was with Lennox. But Lennox doesn't know that.
Yeah, Matthew suspects that they did.
Yeah. And it doesn't. Lyman wouldn't want to deny it because it gives him power over the Lennoxes to be like, haha, I can cast out on your heir, and all you want is to be royalty, and he's your best shot, so I can mess with that. And that's also in that very first scene with the Douglases when Richard and Agnes, they land in the river and then they go to stay with them. And then when they leave and the Douglases are there talking, like one of the things they talk about is, Lyman could cast out on the heir as the implication. So even as far back as then, it was in the subtext.
Yeah.
All right, keep going, Philippe, sorry.
Get a little blurb about George Douglas and how he's sort of gotten exactly what he wanted to out of this whole situation. How his son is now the governor of Morton, I think. Is that what it is? He's got some sort of title in Scotland. So I'm wondering now whoever side George Douglas is going to be on next, now that he's sort of gotten the political power that he wanted to out of this.
Well, I also thought this little aside thing about George's son's wife is now the heiress of Morton was an aside to the fact that George is in the debt of the Dowager. Like the Dowager did this thing for George, and so there's a little bit of a debt owed there. And so because he immediately says, and however much anyone may suspect that Tatty Boy Bala and I are one, no one can prove it. So it's this idea like it doesn't matter how much George suspects, he can't prove it. And the queen just did him this big favor, so he's not gonna, like, I felt like that was a little bit of Lyman saying like, no, that's not your thing actually.
Well, yeah, you can't use George against me because George is now more on the Scottish side, on the Queen Dowager side.
For now. We all know how George Douglas acts, though, so we'll see. They talk about Robin Stewart and how he's tried to kill himself several times in the tower now, and how everyone very much doubts that he'll ever leave the tower alive because of that.
Well, but then O'Liamro's like, actually, that, because Matthew implies that, but O'Liamro actually is like, that's not true, and I'm not stupid. In fact, Warwick's whole standing depends on Stewart getting safely to France.
Yeah, Limo.
Lots of politics there.
Margaret Lennox tries to excuse herself. And I really love Lymond's line on 330. Lymond's voice pleasantly said, "Don't retreat, Countess. You are not being pursued," which like sums up her just to a T. It's like,
Yeah.
I think this must be like a huge part of the reason she hates him so much is that she still wants him so much and he does not want her.
Doesn't care.
And it's such a sign of the sadism in her personality that this unfulfilled lust translates into homicidal desire to murder him.
And such cruelty. Yeah.
And I just love the scene earlier where she's like with her ladies knitting or something. It's like, I mean, she's just like, she's such a psycho and she's so innocent and knitting. Sorry, keep going, please.
And then we just get a little bit more news about some other characters. So Liam lets us know that Jenny Fleming has had her child, and it's a boy. So the king has another son. And of course, Margaret Lennox, the Flemings whores to a woman, which not only sort of insults Jenny and Margaret, but doesn't that also insult Christian Stewart a bit? Isn't that a direct dig?
Yeah, because
And
Christian
Margaret.
was Jenny's goddaughter.
Yeah. And I love that Francis Crawford, so really him, said nothing, but his gaze, even in cold, continued to hold hers until, in the end, the woman's eyes shifted. So she sort of made, like, she gave up. Like, she couldn't, she looked away.
He
like,
outstared her.
Yeah.
But then also what he says right after, some love for a living and some kill. So it's definitely about Christian Stewart, and he's calling her a murderer. He's calling her out for the murder, and she knows that that is what he's thinking, and that's part of why she looks away.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
She has any remorse for it?
No, I don't think she has remorse. I think, there's probably some part of her that knows she's a terrible person, and she just pushes that down and carries on.
Yeah. It could be, though, that she regrets Christian's death, not because of any sort of moral stance, but because it's just caused her more trouble than, like, because Lymond's even set harder against her, or there's been, she could have some sort of completely practical, selfish reason.
I mean, I think she came out as a winner in that because she took away a great ally for him. I think there's probably some part of her, like the part of maybe there's a little bit of feeling for him that she's suppressing. There's probably, like, she's probably not a complete and utter sociopath. There's probably some part of her that has a bit of guilt about all the awful things she's done, but her reaction to that is just to press it down and to be angry and to want to crush him, probably also because he makes her feel some guilt because he knows how awful she is. So like the fact that her eyes shift kind of hints that she feels a tiny bit bad, but
she's never interesting if she does. Like, if she's just a straight sociopath, it's kind of boring. Like, she's more interesting as a character if she's has some complexity in that way. So
also we skipped over this, but I did want to call out again this bit where Liam refers to Lymond as the master of culture, and she laughs about it, and that he's lost his title, which again I just think is the key to this book. He's having this identity crisis. He doesn't know who he is or who he wants to be, and we see in this scene when he's lost his title that with that he's lost position, status, influence, respect, all of these things that the title would bring him. And she's like intentionally, mocking, like, he's nobody now.
Yeah. But she's also implying that the baby could be Lymond's. And it feels like, which is shitty of her, and it feels like, I mean, I kind of wondered if that was intentional on her part, because she made that dig, and she definitely intended to make the dig at Lymond. But it says there was a tiny silence. Then Liam saw her take a quick breath, her eyes flying to Francis Crawford, but Crawford was not looking at her. Between Lennox and Lymond, there passed something unsaid, a single white-hot flash of enmity that could be felt. So that was like that whole Lennox is mad at Lymond for cuckolding him, basically.
Yeah.
But I sort of wonder if the tiny silence and her quick breath, like if she didn't actually intend to make that insult in front of her husband and do that whole thing, if she just wanted to dig at Lymond, and she kind of lost sight of the fact that Matthew was standing there as well. And I don't know.
Yeah, because she looks at Lymond and he's not looking at her, he's looking at Lennox. So it is like she's being so cruel to him, not realizing it's going to backfire on her.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what it does. She's like, your brother's heir is illegitimate. And then there's just like, yeah, well, maybe your heir is illegitimate.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, just a great scene. I love all the intense emotions and all the currents running beneath it.
Yeah.
But there's another great scene coming up that's still part of this chapter between Lymond and Oleumro, which we learn a lot more about. So Oleumro does end up leaving with Lymond, and they go to an inn together. We get more of this imagery where Lymond is not eating or drinking. Oleumro orders all of this food and wine, thinking, oh, well, Taddy's gonna drink. But Lymond doesn't end up eating any of it or drinking, fortunately.
Well, and also as they're on the way there, Oleumro has this moment of asking how far the inn is, and Lymond doesn't answer, and then he says, "Give me your reins," and then Lymond like jerks away and is like, "Good God, no, it isn't far." So Lymond is in a ton of pain and like struggling, I think, to keep going, and then Oleumro notices, because Oleumro is perceptive and empathetic. But then when Lymond realizes he's noticing, he's like, "No, I'm fine."
Yeah, I'm fine, no worries. Yeah.
Which is a very Lymond reaction.
Of course. Well, and it doesn't suit him in the scene to have Oleumro being sympathetic to him, because I think he's intentionally making himself unlikable to Oleumro in this scene, which we'll talk more as we get into it. But also just in terms of cinematic imagery, I love the imagery in this whole sequence where he's lying on the ground in front of the fire and he's juggling with the coins. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, that's really good. Oleumro is going to be heading back to the Sliv Bloom within a week, so he doesn't want to stay in England or go to France. He's kind of done with all of that. And then we just get a lot of talk confirming basically what we've known all along about Robin Stewart being the assassin and all sorts of things. And then we talk about Una, that one other person who knows who the mystery culprit is to Albany, which we don't have to cough anymore because it's been confirmed. And I find it touching that Oleumro is still trying to sort of protect her, and like the way that she abused him. It really shows a lot of his character.
Yeah.
He's such a sweetie. Well, and that's what Lymond is counting on, is he's trying to push Oleumro into helping him. Mm-hmm. And he's basically threatening Una to prompt Oleumro. Right. He's quite ruthlessly manipulative.
Yeah. But Oleumro, I feel like Oleumro knows what he's doing. Like Lymond isn't being that subtle about it. And Oleumro knows what he's doing, but he's also, like, it works because he does actually care about the little girl, and he does actually care about Una enough that he doesn't want, like, the fact that Lymond is manipulating him doesn't make the things that he's saying wrong. Like, he's not lying to Oleumro about any of it. He's just like, this is what's going to happen. You can avoid these things by doing these things.
So here's the part where I think Lymond is manipulating him. And it's when it starts on 335 when he's hiding his face. Mm-hmm. And it's the way that he kind of pretends or leaves the implication that he's only doing this to serve the Dowager Queen, and he's doing this because it's his duty. Mm-hmm. And he's trying to make Oleumro, I think, dislike him specifically as a manipulative person, and not reveal the degree of, what do you call it, how hard this is for him and how much he doesn't want to hurt Una. And his only reason for doing it is because it's my duty, and not, like, we know his real reasons are, much more than just like, I'm serving the Queen Dowager and doing this because it's my job. He cares about her life. He cares about his country. He cares about all these bigger things, but he's showing Liam Rowe this version of himself that's very cold and very manipulative and very shallow and just in it for, you know, serving the Queen Dowager. I think he's obviously on the surface manipulating him about Una, but I think in the subtext, he's also manipulating him about himself, because he knows perfectly well that Liam Rowe is going to go to Robin Stewart and make a pact with Robin against Lymond, and he's trying to get Liam Rowe to dislike him enough here to go do that.
Maybe. I kind of wonder, like, I'm a little bit reluctant to ascribe, like, that's like godlike insightfulness to Lymond. I'm a little bit reluctant to ascribe that much specificity to his knowledge. I think it could also be that he just doesn't want to be vulnerable, and he doesn't want to be weak, and he doesn't want to be perceived as vulnerable or weak, especially to someone who left him in, like, Liam Rowe, he almost died in, you know, so I think his coldness, like, it could be that he's presenting, I am working from duty because that's a position of strength, or it's a, you know, like, it's, I can see him not wanting to be vulnerable and not wanting to be weak in front of Liam Rowe, and that's okay. Like, it's not, that's still a strong argument that he's making of, I don't want to, because he says he doesn't want to hurt Una. He doesn't want to go back and do that. That's true. He's working from duty. Like, I don't think he's lying to Liam Rowe in any of this. I think he's concealing some things, but I mean, I guess lying by omission. But
yeah, it's lying by omission to make himself look worse than he is, which is a very Lymond thing to do. He will always put himself as the sacrificial one. It benefits his plan to have Liam Rowe unsympathetic to him and annoyed at him.
Mm-hmm.
But why do you, but I guess my thing is, yeah, I think you're right. He's doing that. I'm just not sure that his motivations for doing that are, like, his self-image is not great. Like, and hasn't been great ever. Like, and so the idea, like, he could genuinely believe those things about himself. And so, like, what he's showing Liam Rowe is not a manipulation. It's what he thinks is true. Like, this is, does that make sense? Like, he's not, I just feel like trying to be that's a pretty complicated assumption of what people are going to do. Like, if I make myself unlikable to this guy, then he's going to do this for sure. And he's going to go and do this other thing with this other guy. And they're going to, like, that's a lot of steps of other
Lymond does plans like that all the time. Look at Game of Kings. He's manipulating people. He's setting up all these threads in motion. He's good at that. He's Mr. Chess Master.
Yeah, I just don't think it's not necessary for him to be, like, he can just be a genuinely forcing Liam Rowe to make this decision doesn't depend on a real complicated manipulation. Like,
well, so I'll point out the bits in the text where I see this. So first of all, it's on 335. His hands come down from his face and he's staring at the rug. So kind of throughout the scene, he's hiding his face and he's staring at the rug. And I think part of the reason that he keeps hiding his face and looking away is because he doesn't want Liam Rowe to see the conflict in his face. He wants Liam Rowe to just see him as this cold puppet master, and not see the ambiguity of what's going on with him. And then again, we get this in the face below him, there died slowly both the anger and the light. Other changes were there, but in the shadows, Liam Rowe could not see them. So again, that there's more conflict on Lymond's face than Liam Rowe can see, which echoes, bits we had earlier as well, where, like, he was working really hard, but Liam Rowe didn't see it. He had ambiguity on his face after one of their fights, but Liam Rowe didn't see it. So this idea that he's hiding his face so that Liam Rowe sees him as this more one-dimensional person than he is. And then the way that he talks about Una, when Liam Rowe reveals that she's the mistress of Cormac O'Connor, and Lymond says, without emotion, I didn't know whether you knew. which is such a hurtful thing to say. And he didn't have to say it like that. He didn't have to reveal, I knew the whole time and I didn't tell you. I really think that the way he says that, because that's what sets Liamro off, is intentionally trying to provoke this dislike in Liamro.
Okay, but let's back up a little bit because you skipped a few things. So in the first two examples you gave, I really read those as him hiding his own vulnerability. Like he's looking away, his face is in shadow, and he's not wanting to show his emotion because emotion is vulnerable. And that makes him like he wants to be strong. He's trying to be, he's in physical pain, he's in physical weakness, and he's trying to be strong. And that line about the line that he has with that emotion, it's then Lymond spoke without triumph, indeed, without indeed any emotion at all. I didn't know, he said, whether you knew. That was hurtful, but I read that line as a quiet, I didn't know whether you knew. Like it's without triumph. So there's no gloating. There's no, like deliberately, no, none of that, without emotion. I didn't see that as I saw it as a hurtful thing to say, but it was more like, I wasn't sure that you knew or not, you know, and it just was, it wasn't, I don't think it was necessarily, because she deliberately says without triumph, like that's part of that line. So
yeah, but without any emotion at all, which goes right back to the cold puppet master motif.
Maybe not. Like it's, yeah. I think I just have a more sympathetic reading of Lymond in this scene. Like that.
I don't know that it's unsympathetic. I think that I think the end result we get is that Liamro thinks that Lymond is this shallow, selfish, manipulative person. But what we in the audience know that Liamro doesn't is the degree of depth underlying what's actually going on with Lymond, and that there's way more to him. So
right.
I don't see Lymond as unsympathetic.
Hiding that stuff from Liamro. I think he's hiding that stuff from Liamro not out of a sense of manipulation. I think he's hiding that stuff from Liamro because he's intensely vulnerable in this because of how he is right now. Like, I just don't think he wants to show any weakness at all. And the things that he's saying are enough to convince Liamro. I don't think he needs to be, because the truth of how he treated Liamro is certainly enough to make him mad at him. Like, he was cruel, and he was like, that's reality. He doesn't need to be more cruel to make Liamro think these things.
I mean, we can agree to disagree. I still think he's intentionally putting the worst spin on it because it benefits his plan to get Liamro to dislike him.
Yeah. I just don't see it that way. I don't think he is. I guess I just think he's more vulnerable.
But I don't think these are mutually exclusive. I think he's vulnerable too. Yeah. I just think he's smart and manipulative on top of being vulnerable.
I personally think it lies somewhere in the middle. I think he's using his vulnerability as a manipulation. Maybe not quite to the level that Lara thinks, and he's definitely showing his vulnerability here, but he's definitely aware of how vulnerable he is, and that's part of his manipulation in this specific moment.
I guess because I feel like if he had done that on purpose, it's too much of a chance to backfire. Like, there's too much of a chance for Liamro to say F you and walk off and do nothing. Like, to be that manipulative and to be like, to intentionally try and make Liamro not like him even more than he already doesn't like him. Like, why wouldn't he just say F you and walk away? Like, there's no reason.
Because he's already going to walk away. He's already saying he's not going to help him. So he's trying to get Liamro fired up enough to go help him, to do what he wants him to do. He's trying to get him fired up to go talk to Robin. He wasn't going to do it until this happened, and it worked.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're both compelling viewpoints. Like, you could go either way with it.
So then what happens is that Liamro is so angry, in fact, that he actually kicks him into the light and goes off on him with, "You're so damned brilliant, you know everything. It's hard set you'd be to give yourself a dull Saturday afternoon. We're all puppets, not the old queens only, but the rest of us, man, woman, and child, looking the fools of the world." So Liamro is probably the most angry we've ever seen him, even angrier than after the serenade.
I
And
also
again, yeah.
where he goes into it on 336. You have roused your bright words before him the like of a king, and you, a halfling gallows glass in the top folly of youth, with a tongue to make the blood leap from the bone only. She nursed you well, did she? Just such beautiful language. And he's laying it all out to Lymond right now. So.
Well, and again, what he calls him is basically, you're shallow and young and cruel, which is not the truth of Lymond. And I think that if Lymond wasn't intentionally showing him the worst, a person as perceptive as a Liamro would have a better opinion of him.
But is that some of what Lymond thinks about himself?
Oh,
and
sure.
I think there's this bit where after this tirade that Liamro gives, I think this is part of what makes me think this, is that there was a pause, then in a voice unlike his own, I have my duty, Crawford said. And so it's just like he's like accepting this idea of who he is that Liamro has just pronounced, and he's internalizing that and saying it has to be done and going on. And it's hurtful. Like, I think he's hurt by this, not that it was intentional. Like he responds with this voice that wasn't his own. And
but can't it be both? That he has a low opinion of himself, but also that because again, he's hiding his face throughout this whole thing. His voice isn't like his own, that he's only showing a bit of himself, of what he really feels to Liamro. He's showing the worst bit.
yeah, I just don't think, I mean, it's okay if we disagree. I just don't think he's doing it that deliberately. I don't think he's doing it that intentionally. I think he's trying as hard as he can to convince Liamro to help him. But I think the violence of Liamro's reaction is a surprise to him. I don't think he did it on purpose, because I think his voice is like, I did it because of duty. And I think that vehemence, I think if he had been trying to do it on purpose, that vehemence would have been his goal. And I don't think at the end of the scene, that reaction from Liamro was necessarily his goal.
So I guess I think it
was his goal, but I don't think that emotional violence and anger.
He had to spur emotion in Liamro to get him to act. And I think part of it comes back to, he really doesn't want to have to go, threaten Una to talk. And he's trying everything he can to get Liamro to help with Robin, because the alternative is to hurt Una. I also like the accusation Liamro gives him, because we keep having these descriptions of Robin as a puppet and marionette-like. So then Liamro saying, you're treating everyone like puppets, and he says, but you have them there on their strings, all curled tight to your littlest finger, and you little heeding as you swing them what soul you may bruise. Mm-hmm. Which I think, I actually think that Liamro is right, but he's also wrong. Lymond is heedlessly treating people like puppets. He does that to Robin 100%. He does that a little bit to Liamro. He makes Liamro, sets him up as, first of all, he sets him up as bait. And then I still think here he's manipulating him also. I think that Lymond, there's much more to Lymond than this, but I think this is something he's doing. He is manipulating people. It isn't very cool, and he's not perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
As you say.
Shall we move on to the next chapter?
Well, two other bits that we skipped over that I wanted to highlight was just on 334, where Lymond moved, drew a sharp breath, and relaxed. And then later, Liamro could hear the hiss as the other man let go his breath, which is very subtle, but he's in huge amount of pain in this scene also.
Yeah. Yeah. I think part of my resistance to your reading of this is it makes Lymond less interesting to me. So as a reader, I don't want Lymond to be that able, because it makes him, I want him to have more uncertainty over his actions as a character, and it makes his character more interesting to me if he's not quite that capable. Like, that's a level of manipulation that's kind of superhuman. And I want him to be not quite that capable, because it makes him more interesting to me.
But
So,
think of it this way, he screws up completely throughout this book. He screwed up catching Robin, he screws up with Bryce, he screws up his tatty boy. He's messed up every single thing he's done. I kind of like the idea that he did something right at some point.
yeah. I mean, maybe it's because he's not completely smashed in this scene. He's able to do it. So, but it's like he read Bryce so wrong. Maybe it's because he knows Liam wrote better that he's able to.
Yeah, definitely knows Liam.
That might justify it.
Yeah, I mean, and again with Bryce, he kind of came in with an assumption. Oh, Bryce is going to be like
Yeah.
his brother. It's like, don't assume.
Yeah. Okay, next chapter.
All right, so chapter 7, London pledged to fasting. Robin Stewart has been put in the Tower of London, and Liam Rowe goes to visit him after the events of the last chapter, whether he was manipulated or not. So Robin Stewart has slashed his wrists and he's not eating. He's in a really bad shape. And Liam Rowe is there, and he sort of uses this ploy of, let's team up against Lymond in order to get the information out of Robin Stewart. Because
Is it a ploy?
That will get him. Is it a ploy? Is it not? I don't know. Is Robin Stewart being manipulated yet again? It works. So we see this jealousy of Robin Stewart of these other people that have worked hard and gotten what they wanted, which is sort of what we were talking about earlier. I have no idea what this note says, so I'm just going to cross it out.
I'll make a couple comments as you look at it. Oh, were you going to say something?
Yeah, like we do really get we get this picture of Robin, like, that is even clearer from before, and it's super whiny. like it's kind of what I was saying before about how Robin Stewart had resented all his life the fact that he, of all others, so like he's the worst, he of all others was always imposed upon, that he had been forced to work hard for all he possessed without the magical mercy of accident or fortune to make smooth the path. And it's like, dude, you do not have it the worst of everyone on the planet.
But I think there is a big change in him here where he knew now that he'd been betrayed, not because of what he was not, but because of what he was. He was a painstaking fool with less than average gifts. And so I think he sees himself clearly in how, much he screwed up, and he like really hates himself, and he, genuinely tries to kill himself.
Yeah. I think the one part of his own personality he doesn't see clearly here is his laziness. Like, he still is holding on to the fact, like, I was told that if you worked really hard, your life will be good. And yet he didn't really work very hard.
Yeah.
Or at least that's the implication that we have.
We also get this implication of he still, has this intense emotions about Tatty Boy. And it's when Lymond comes to visit that he tries to kill himself. And he hears his voice outside of his door, and it says, stripped of its brogue, he would have yet recognized it at the ends of the earth. Like, he really intensely was into Tatty Boy and is devastated. And then, oh, sorry.
No, just, I was agreeing.
Oh, okay. And then we have Liam Rowe, who's come to rescue Stewart from the egotistical shadow of Francis Crawford. And I want your help to trim a bowelless devil named Francis Crawford until there's a human place on his soul to put the mark of grace on. Philippe, you said that was a ploy. Do you think he really means it, or do you think he's just saying this to get Robin to go back with him?
I think he's using how he really feels in order to get the information out. I don't think he's going to end up betraying Lymond in any sort of way in the end. I hope not, at least. But like, he's definitely still angry. The hurt is fresh from the scene at the end. So
I really hope that he's not planning on betraying Lymond, but I think the emotion's real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's obviously it's ambiguous at this point. I think he means it, but I don't think he realizes the severity of what the consequences would be also.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that would really speak to your interpretation of the last scene being correct would be that Liamro's a terrible liar. Like, we know that he's a horrible, horrible liar. And so does Lymond, obviously. So this only works if he is genuinely angry. I mean, I think he was genuinely angry already. I don't think he needed extra angry. but it definitely only works if he really feels all this emotion, because we already know he can't lie to save anything. So
yeah, and I mean, he wasn't that angry before that scene, and here it's totally what hooks Robin is. Here is a fellow victim, and it's the sincerity of Liamro's hurt that makes Robin, suddenly like come out of his fugue state and be like, yeah,
right, you're gonna get him. Yeah.
But also I like the bit here with Liamro that this, opening up to what he's really feeling was the hardest thing, perhaps the only hard thing he had ever done in his life. So Mr. I don't get involved is riled up enough to get involved.
Yeah. And be open about this.
Go ahead.
No, I should say, and then we get this sad little bit about Una, and just about she didn't try to kill Liamro because he was a Liamro. She tried to kill him because he was O'Connor's rival.
Yeah. But then later, when she got to know him better, she tried to send him away rather than kill him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I also like the fact that like she very explicitly draws a parallel between Liamro's feelings for Una and Robin's feelings for Tatty Boy. We have Robin flashing back to the feeling of the strong hands holding him that vital, glorious night on the rooftops. You and me were damned ninnies both. So the two of them in love with someone who's not into them.
And this makes
and betrayed them.
Heart tug again, just a little bit for Robin Stewart.
Yeah.
Just a little bit, though.
Just a little bit.
Like I said, he's lost estimation in my value. So I do like that Robin Stewart, at least in this instance, is aware that he's been used and manipulated and how he dealt with Harrison. He was clearly meant to kill him in that moment, and he's aware of that. And that's another reason he feels so sort of terrible, because he got used again. So
Liamro tries to comfort him a little bit. He's like, but you got revenge. So it's like, okay.
Liamro's so cute.
It'd be grand, wouldn't it, if it were as simple?
Yeah.
But with me, it's never simple. So yeah. But he's gonna, use his silence by not speaking. He's trying to use that to get back at Lymond. Mm-hmm. Of course, Liamro turns it around. So.
Mm-hmm. And it works. He's gonna go get revenge on Daubeny and Tatty Boy.
I know. First the Tane, then the Teller. Like, we're getting them.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just really like, I may be skipping ahead a little bit, but I just really like how after this whole scene they have together, sharing their sort of disappointment at Lymond, it's at the very end that Robin Stewart finally sort of looks at Liamro. It's like, oh, your whiskers are gone. When did that happen? Like, he hasn't actually paid attention.
Which I sort of love that everyone comments on this. Like, dude, you shaved your beard. What happened? And it's like, yeah. It's funny.
You break the heart of a fresh clippet yowl, which I have no idea what that means, but I'm sure it's something.
I guess a sheep that was shaved?
Oh, like a ewe. Ah.
Oh, okay.
I get it.
Huh.
This Scottish pronunciation. So one last little section before this, we learn that sort of 3 weeks later, there is passage arranged for them all to go back to France.
I think the kind of the main stuff here is that or at least the stuff I thought was interesting, is that we get a little bit more of the politics, and we can kind of figure out what Cormac and Una may have been up to, which is that if Mary dies and the alliance between England and France falls apart, then France might then be ready to stir up trouble in Ireland again, in which case Cormac will probably get his 5,000 men and a French blessing to kick the English out of his country. So this sort of idea of the political situation being such that Ireland would benefit from the death of Mary, Queen of Scots, because then France would send troops to Ireland to kick out the English. Maybe if you're a really hopeful Irish patriot.
Right.
Sort of a stretch, but gives them motive.
Right. And I sort of like that Lymond is kind of saying this thing where he says, it is well to have all this clear. And so then he goes in and is like, Ireland's going to benefit if Mary dies. And then Oliamro sat down. Meanwhile, continued Lymond, ignoring him, Robin Stewart has confessed. And so it's like this, okay, you want to protect this little girl, but let's be clear about the fact that if she dies, your country could benefit. And Oliamro sits down, and it's kind of like this realization that, oh, yeah, right. But he's still gonna, but I think he's still gonna help. He's not, Lymond's just kind of like, let's be clear about this. And I really like that. Also, there's a bit earlier where he says to Oliamro, he says, our nations, yours and mine, are exceedingly open to hurt, and I personally am not, which is deeply untrue. Like, the idea that Lymond is not open to being hurt personally, it's like, no, but I love that you're saying that.
Well, Lymond has a whole complex about, I'll put myself,
right.
at risk because I don't matter anyway, and I'm super tough. Like,
right, you're really super vulnerable.
Yeah.
Mr. Tough Career.
His lack of realization of his own vulnerability is one of his biggest vulnerabilities, because he's always pushing himself too far and then not being able to finish what he's trying to do.
So at the top of page 343, the stick had gone, and with it any undue need to exercise the humanities. So Lymond is actually sitting here and talking to him plain. It really called back that moment with Gideon Somerville, where like we had seen all this flowery language and all these, things that he brings up. And during that speech with Gideon, it was all sort of stripped away while they were just talking politics. And it's really kind of that same moment here. It's like, let's just talk about this. I'm not going to be flowery and excessive here. So
I also took this as Oliamro maybe was treating Lymond a little bit gentler because he was injured, but now that he's better, Oliamro can just be cold to him and doesn't have to be kind at all. Mm-hmm. Like the way he tried to help with his reins before. Mm-hmm. Now he doesn't have to. I also love the bit about when they're talking about it being Giovanni, and Lymond says, I knew it, every sign pointed to it, but I must have Stewart's confirmation, which is exactly what you guys have been saying all along. Every sign pointed to it. Yep, Lymond knew too.
Yeah. Which I'm glad that they said, because I'm kind of like, there's no way that we're figuring this out and he's not figuring it out, which is what I almost wanted to go back and check and see, like, I wish I'd made a note of where all the clues that I'd picked up on were, because I wanted to see if Tatty Boy was around for all of those, because I thought maybe it's possible he doesn't know if like everything that we're seeing is outside of his presence, then maybe it would, but like if he had seen all the stuff we'd seen, then there's no way that he wouldn't know. So.
So now that we know we've been right about Daubeny, Laura, did you catch that the first time you read the book? Were you?
Oh, I don't remember anymore. Yeah. I think honestly though, the first time I read this, I was just like half of it, I was like, I have no idea what's going on. I don't speak any French. I definitely remember the scene at the dinner with Deschamaux's wife. I was like, I don't know what's happening here. Like I definitely, the first time I read it, I was just zooming through it for the plot. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also just want to highlight, I again, how callous Lymond is about Robin. Stewart's probably laying wagers, the bastard. Laughter aflame in his eyes. Like he's very, very, very callous about the fact that he broke this guy's heart, which I don't think is admirable. And I do think is an argument that he's being a bit of a puppet master without regard for the feelings of the people he's manipulating. And also then the bit at the end where Lymond, there was no trace of a limp and a world of malice in his eye. So he's better and he's gonna get his justice.
Yeah.
One last bit of info we get before we close this chapter is that the Lennoxes will be back. They're on their way to Chateaubriand to request that Mary, Queen of Scots, marry the King of England instead. So, which I don't see why they think that would go well, but
they were probably behind the whole thing.
Yeah. Lennox is marked as a conspirator as well.
Yeah. Which was what we were kind of hoping was the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So super quickly, I want to show you guys some fan art. First off, this is not specifically this chapter, but I felt that it was apropos for our icy cold Vervassal. This is by Ying Draws on Twitter. And I do love this sort of cold version of Francis Crawford.
That's great.
Yeah, I really like this one. And then this is Margaret with her monkey. By Prince of Pictou.
That first picture was giving me all sorts of Draco Malfoy realness.
So apparently Cassie Clare read the Lymond Chronicles before she wrote the Draco in Leather Pants series that it's like set that motif. So Lymond's influence is everywhere, man. All these kids that grew up reading that.
So wait, that turned into the damn it, I forgot the
whatever her
the Shadowhunters series.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
And for our readers, we were talking last time after the video about how Captive Prince is actually Lymond fanfic. He's everywhere. All right, guys, what do you expect to happen or want to happen next?
Well, we're in the last portion of this book, so D'Aubigny's going to get caught. He's going to be revealed to be the traitor. The Lennoxes will be in France, so there's more sort of opportunities for them to just screw everything up. Yeah.
I would like to see Margaret be Margaret and horrible, and I mean like smart and horrible. Like I like that. I think just to reiterate from last time, I still want to see like Margaret or a competent villain go up against competent Lymond and have that dynamic. I still want to see D'Aubigny get taken down in some like super dramatic, over the top, ridiculous way, just because he's been these super dramatic, over the top, ridiculous assassination attempts. I just think it'd be funny. And I still would like to see the king get involved somehow. I feel like he's been like this very removed character from all of this, and yet it's all happening around him, and I don't know. I would just like to see the King of France like somehow take responsibility for something. And yeah, I
do hope that Robin Stewart is complicit in the takedown of D'Aubigny.
Yeah, me too.
I just really want that to happen. Yeah. However it happens, even if he dies because of it.
Yeah. I would like him to have a change of heart somehow. And I would like it if Lymond took some responsibility for some of that. Like it's Robin's choices are not his fault for sure. But I would like to see him take some responsibility for how he could have turned Robin's path and didn't. And that would be nice.
Yeah.
So. All right. Any final questions, comments, thoughts on these chapters?
All good here.
All right. Well, then we'll see everyone next time.